So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring in my good friend here. He is a former Republican nominee for the United States Senate. He is a TV host and political analyst. I've seen him on a couple of times in recent, matter of fact, over the last several weeks regarding this issue. He is the founder and managing editor of Pinion Equity Ventures, and he has been covering one of the biggest stories that no one is talking about in the mainstream media. I haven't seen this. Well, I'm not calling it mainstream media anymore. We're calling it machine state media. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you my friend, Mr. Joseph Pinion. What's going on, brother?
Always good to see you, my friend. How's everything going?
Good to see you, man. I've been all right, man. I've been all right. You were on here with Mr. Nostra Chavez.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, Mr.
What's
Pinion.
going on? How are you?
Happy to have you. Very good. How are you doing?
You know, just another Sunday in an insane state. So
Well,
we just do what we can.
Just definitely get into that.
So let's get started, because Joe, you have been on the front lines of a massive story here in the state of New York. Apparently, there is a strike going on upstate, and it involves correctional officers. So if you could just tell us, man, what is happening up there, and what should we know?
Well, look, let's start from the very beginning, because we have to assume most people don't know anything about this story, because to your point, whether you want to call it machine media, legacy media, the real story of what is occurring all across New York State has not been told. But here is what has happened. Back in 2021, Democrats, by virtue of the tyranny of one-party rule here in New York State, after a 2 to 4 year conversation about prison reform, passed what is called as the HALT Act. The HALT Act is colloquially referred to as this prohibition on putting people in solitary confinement. Specifically, if you actually dig into the reality of what that means, we haven't had solitary confinement in New York State in a very long time. But what HALT did do, which has had a drastic impact on the safety or lack thereof that occurs in our prisons, is prevent people from being thrown in specialized housing longer than 15 days within any 60 or 90-day period of time, depending on how the numbers look. And so we have seen, since HALT went into effect, starting in 2021, over 100% increase in assaults of inmates on correction officers. More specifically, for those people who are criminal justice reform minded, we have seen, depending on how you measure the numbers, anywhere from a 150 to a 180% increase in inmate on inmate assault. And so you have correction officers who feel as if their hands have been tied behind their back, while they are less safe, and more importantly, while the people who are under their purview are less safe as well. And so now you get to where the rubber has met the road, where you have had a very difficult time getting more correction officers to sign up for the job. And then you have a commissioner that released, in the wake of a no confidence vote, by the way, a memo that dictated that the 30% deficit in staffing was going to be permanent. That means that we are understaffed to the tune of 30%, and they wanted to make sure that the 70% was a new 30%. Any expert out there will tell you that you need to be around 90% for prisons to be safe, for them to function properly. And bad things happen when you have dangerous people in an environment that never brings out the best in anyone, being placed in a situation where the safety mechanisms have been reduced. And so the correction officer said, enough is enough. Some of the issues that they are talking about, things that the average person at home probably does not know. The state of New York has spent millions of dollars on screening equipment, the same equipment that you and I all walk through when we go to the airport. Well, guess what? If you go to a prison in the state of New York, depending on what facility you go to, the screenings are optional. Depending on, yes, I'll repeat that. The screenings are optional. So if you're trying to go to Aruba, you got to go through the TSA screening machine. If you're trying to go to Attica, trying to get into that room, you probably don't have to go through the screening machine. What people also don't seem to realize is that if you are caught trying to introduce contraband, aka an improvised weapon, drugs, or anything thereof, into a prison environment, as the meme says, you go straight to jail. No, you do not go straight to jail. You probably just get to go back to your car to put it into your car and maybe try next week to come visit one of your loved ones.
Try again.
This is the lunacy that correctional officers were dealing with when they decided to walk out the door. And perhaps the catalyst to this walkout, you had about 30 individuals up at Upstate in Franklin County, around Bear Hill. There's a few facilities around there that were all exposed to an unknown substance. Now, we can all suspect what the substance would be in this fentanyl craze that we're living in, but we can't say what the substance is because we no longer do the testing on premises at the prisons. But 30 individuals.
Come on.
But 30 individuals found themselves fainting, nearly losing their lives, including one nurse who found herself Narcaned, not once, not twice, not 3 times. Over 4 times she was Narcaned. And the result of all of this Narcanning, besides the trauma, besides the family feeling as if the work environment has finally gotten to a level that is completely unacceptable, she lost a child in all of this. And so these are the stakes.
That's crazy.
Hold a second. This is a correctional officer, a female correctional officer?
A female works for a nurse working in corrections. Who found herself exposed to this substance. By the way, the official position of the state of New York was that they were not exposed to a foreign substance, was that they were all experiencing some kind of mass hysteria event.
Wow.
So again, when people start to understand what's really happening here, Kathy Hochul stands behind the podium and says illegal strike 30 times. You have people who are paid money to investigate stories doing no investigation. She tries to invoke words like the Taylor Law. The Taylor Law does not exempt the state of New York from actually having safe work conditions. And it's in fact part of the Taylor Law requires those safe work conditions on top of the obvious state laws that prescribe that we have to have safe work conditions. So that is why you had about 14,000 correctional officers who've gone out on strike. Since they have gone out on strike, they have been bullied, they have been ignored. The state of New York has broken so many laws trying to induce them to come back to work that it is hard to keep track. Some of those broken laws include stripping people retroactively of their health care and then trying to prevent them from being able to purchase Cobra. You had an individual who showed up for cancer treatment, has multiple brain tumors. This is life and death for them, only to find out that not only was their health insurance canceled and they could not cover that day's treatment, but any treatment they had received going all the way back to the 17th would not be covered. So this is the craziness that's happening here with New York State, with them now trying to tell people, come back to work and we will reinstate your health insurance, but there will still be a gap in coverage. Gap in coverage is a really fancy word for saying children are going to be showing up for dialysis without coverage. People are going to be showing up for cancer treatment without coverage. Individuals who legitimately need medicine are going to be showing up at the pharmacy without coverage. So what they have done is crazy. It is insane. And the fact that the media is not covering it is in fact a travesty unto its own self.
Go ahead, Nos. I'm
your head. It'll make
Opinion.
your
What
head
do you?
spin, man.
That's a lot.
It's hard to digest it all.
Why do you think? Exactly. Why do you think the media is not covering it, Mr. Opinion?
Look, I think the unfortunate reality is that there is a reason why, no matter what state you're in, you traditionally find prison facilities in counties that over-index for poverty. You see correction facilities in places where you have individuals and communities that have limited other opportunities when it comes to the work environment. And so we place prisons in counties that New York State has quite simply written off. We have placed prisons in counties the Democratic Party no longer counts on for political support. And as a result, you see how they treat the people that live in those counties, and you see how they treat the people that work for the state within the boundaries of these counties with absolute utter disdain. We had a woman, I'm not going to repeat her name because she doesn't deserve the attention, but she is effectively the tip of the spear for the monstrous behavior of the state, did a press conference with the commissioner, gleefully correcting the reporter about the numbers of people she has kicked off of health insurance without a single care in the world for the fact that she was destroying lives and using economic coercion to try to bring people back to a work environment that they haven't made safer. And so I think all of that, the tonnage of that, is why you see what's happening here. Kathy Hochul knows she can't win a primary if she actually repealed HALT, because the people that put HALT in place are individuals that care about how prison reform looks on paper, but do not seem to care about the realities of prison reform when it comes to the actual implementation.
One question, Joe. What does HALT stand for?
Right. So it's that humane, what is that? Humane alternatives to long-term what is it?
Incarceration.
Whatever the T is. Who the hell knows? The T stands for terrible, in my humble opinion, right? And I think, and look, there are a lot of good things that come from HALT, right? There are additional programs that come for individuals that are behind bars, right? And I think much of the focus on HALT at the beginning was this fact that they were actually putting these programs in place for people that were incarcerated, right? To figure out if they could develop skills and things of that nature to occupy their time while they were behind bars. But in an environment where you end up having individuals that have by virtue of this reduction in the staffing, now you have people that should be in a maximum security prison, in a medium security prison, right? For cost reasons and also for staffing reasons. So all of a sudden, a person that effectively should have 2 to 4 guards that are going from place to place with them are finding themselves in dorms with multiple people where you have 1 or 2 guards watching 50 people at a time. That is a recipe for disaster. And now it becomes worse when this person who is a bad actor in society becomes a worse actor within a prison environment, and they know that they can't be placed inside of the actual facility, inside of a specialized housing unit for longer than a period of 15 days. And so, as I've said, prison is not daycare, but even kids that misbehave can be put in timeout. When you know they can't be placed in timeout anymore, watch out. Bad things start to happen. So I think that's what ends up happening here. It just becomes a very tricky situation here where people are finding themselves under siege and under attack on a job that was never easy, that was always high risk, but now has become so dangerous, in fact, that in many ways it violates the core tenets of workplace safety, no matter how you slice it.
Becomes not worth it to go to work. I just want to say real quick, it sounds like, and I think you already mentioned a statistic that speaks to this, but it sounds like this is also very dangerous for the prisoners and inmates themselves, right? To have a guy who's in a dorm with a bunch of people with less guards, so guards aren't necessarily going to jump in and help if there's we might get killed ourselves, and we definitely don't want to kill these guys because we're going to get thrown into prison if we kill somebody or harm them or something like that. So let's just, I guess we're going to have to sit and watch, or maybe we're just not going to be able to be there at the moment. And somebody can get killed very easily. So it's like if you're a Democrat that doesn't care much about police or correctional officers or anything else besides the criminals, which is often the case with the Democrats, it seems like lately, shouldn't you at least care about the inmates?
Well, I mean, that's the point that many of us have made, is that take out the inmate on correctional officer assaults, which should appall anybody. I mean, if you get on an MTA bus and you assaulted the bus driver, you're going to jail. We've got people in here who are
If
stabbing
they catch
correction
you.
officers, right? They're slicing correction officers across the face. They're not even going into specialized housing for an extended period of time, much less catching new charges when they're inside. So, you know, we have a criminal justice system that's delivering justice for no one, including the law-abiding citizens on the outside who are depending on us to actually do some correcting, to actually be releasing people in society that are better off than when they went in. And I think to that point, that's why you see that the actual amount of assaults on inmates, from inmate to other inmates, is through the roof. It outpaces the inmate on correction officer assault. And I would remind people, those are just the numbers that we have. So many of these actual attacks they have become so pervasive, it's very difficult to track the numbers. If most people being honest, they would say that some of these things they don't even bother to write down on paper anymore, unless it results in an injury that is just so absolutely heinous that it has to be documented for posterity. But the numbers, the real numbers, when you talk to these people, are through the roof. And so I don't know where you would have people that say they care about the rights of incarcerated individuals, which is their preferred language, and then turn around and have no care for the fact that we've got a 150, 170, 200% increase on inmates being assaulted, incarcerated individuals being assaulted, and somehow that statistic doesn't bother them, all in the aftermath of HALT being put in place. So, you know, look, correlation is not causation, but we passed the law, and all of a sudden, we have assaults going through the roof. And many of the things that people are trying to talk about in the quote unquote repeal of HALT deal directly with many of the things that are directly leading to these assaults, right? People that would otherwise have been in specialized housing if they had the ability to be placed in specialized housing. I'll take it a step further. You have, you know, we used to have a thing called protective custody, right? Now you have limited the ability of individuals to put inmates in protective custody involuntarily. What does that mean? That means that any person who is inside of a prison and has come forward and spoken about drugs being brought into the prison, has been talking about contraband being brought inside the prison, things that are dangerous for themselves and the correction officers. Well, guess what? If they get put in specialized housing, now everybody knows that they are, quote unquote, a snitch. They will never be able to do a peaceful day of their time ever again. So all of these policies that have been put in place make life a very dangerous place for many of the people that are simply just trying to do their time. And when we have these terms, quote unquote, who was the model incarcerated person? I mean, everyone who's in prison in New York State these days has probably done something, but some people are just trying to repay their debt to society. They're not trying to leave in a body bag. And so we have created policies that have made it very difficult for people to know that they're going to be able to do their time and get out when it's over without having their life dramatically altered by some form of violence or some other form of attack.
Yeah, and these are who are people like family members, and some of these people, like, you know, maybe they made a mistake and they were rehabilitated and they live really productive lives in the community. So it's like we should also worry about them as well, but especially the correctional officers who already had an extremely dangerous job. It was already super risky. There's already always a chance they're going to get killed or seriously injured, and now it seems like there's a really high chance, or a much higher chance, and then it becomes you have to make a decision. It's like, why do I really want to go to a job where there's a 30% chance I'll get killed, you know, this year or something like that? It's like that becomes not worth it anymore.
Well, I mean, look, put it this way. Again, I always tell my friends on the left, I don't get to tell you what to believe in, but I do get to demand you be consistent. The state of New York has decided that we do not want to be investing in private prisons. We don't want to be even touching private prisons, even tangentially. Right. So we have divested of any fund that invests in private prisons. We have made it illegal for people in New York State to be housed in private prisons. Well, I got news for you. If you've made it impossible for correction officers to do the job, if you have demonstrated, as the state of New York has over the last 2 weeks, that you don't actually give a damn about anybody who wears that uniform and goes to jail every day on your behalf, you're going to have no choice but to have private prisons, because those are going to be the only people that are willing to do the job. So as is always the case, and not to get off track, but whether we're talking about people who say they want to reduce emissions and then shut down Indian Point in Westchester County that was providing 30% of the actual energy for the metropolitan area. And then they're shocked that carbon emissions go up 28%. Or we're talking about people who refuse to make any adjustment to HALT, while the people who are dealing with the consequences of the HALT Act are finding themselves unable to do their job. And the people that they're supposed to be able to keep safe are finding themselves brutalized on an increasing basis. Yeah, eventually you have to confront the fact that I'm not saying your intentions were not good, but the results here in the real world with the rest of us do not match the expectations you had on paper. So changes need to be made. And I think that is simply what people are talking about. The governor keeps making it about money. The commissioner keeps coming back with these rebuttals that include more money. Here's the crazy thing that I tell people. They're asking for more people to be hired, right? That means currently in the state of New York, we budget for $240 million a year in overtime for corrections. That's in the budget. We don't have an emergency session to get more money to staff the prisons because we've already built $240 million into the budget for overtime pay for the prisons. So ironically, if you actually think about this, what they're asking for is to make less money. Actually, they're trying to make probably between $150 and $200 million less than they're currently making. They're saying the money's not worth it because we are not safe, because the job has become an unmitigated nightmare. And we have people that are doing the political shuffle to make sure that the extremists on the far left can be appeased. And so here is the crazy dichotomy. If you did a silent vote inside of a prison today, I guarantee you the overwhelming majority of the incarcerated people in most of those facilities would vote to make changes to HALT. But no one is going to make that vote when they're living 500 feet away, 50 feet away from a murderer that doesn't want a single change made to HALT, right? I could tell you stories about a regular Joe sitting in a regular medium security prison who's got jars and bottles with urine inside of it, not because they are a hoarder, but because they're being extorted to use the toilet. And so the only time they can afford to pay to use the toilet is when they have to go number two. It's not cost effective for them to pay the actual extortion money to go number one. This is what's happening in the prison. And that's not going to show up on your incident report. That doesn't show up on the levels of assault inmate on inmate that are occurring. But I guarantee you that is an assault on that person's character, that is an assault on that person's dignity, and the people that are responsible for putting him in a situation where he literally cannot afford to use the bathroom are the people that would probably find themselves in specialized housing more regularly if that were an option. But it is not an option because of the actual paradigm that exists in the state of New York because of HALT.
So let me ask you this question, because this is heavy stuff. This is even heavier than I imagined. When did the National Guard get involved? Because I do have one thing that I wanted to I think this is the correct clip here. Where they show where we talk about where they talk about the National Guard coming into what is it, Sing Sing? I think is where this is currently.
Well,
but
yeah, go ahead.
No. I think this is where it is, but I'm gonna play the clip, and then you can we could talk about it on the other side.
Concern for Kathy Hochul should be dealing with the very real concerns of the men and women you see standing outside of this facility today. They are not here griping over money. They are here because they believe that they are going to walk out of their door and not be able to return home to their families. Let them out! Let them out! Let them out! So we're here in Franklin County trying to, number one, figure out if these 14, maybe 18 officers that are ready to walk off the job are actually going to be allowed to leave.
HALT's not working. We need help inside to make sure that our families and our friends are safe and working conditions, and not just security. We have a lot of civilians that work inside of there, that we're in charge of their safety.
I worked 30 years for the department. I retired from the facility across the street here from Bear Hill. During my tenure in there, we had discipline, we had order, and the vast majority of the inmates in those facilities want order and discipline.
This all began back in 2021, really 2019, when they first came up with this insanity called the HALT Act, you know? And from there, I mean, it was just been a fire hose of nonsense, day after day, the cutting back of the staffing. People realize they've been pushed to the edge and standing up for what they believe in. And, you know, however long it takes, you know, we'll keep coming back, we'll keep supporting you guys and just letting you know that, you know, we're going to get through.
This is the most insane shit I've ever seen in my life. No. I'm being no. Listen, I come from. I think I told you this the last time I saw you, Joe. My father is a retired correctional officer who worked 20 plus years with the Baltimore City Detention Center.
Yep.
Okay. Conditions were bad, but they were never that bad. They were never so bad. I mean, it's like I never imagined that the Democrat Party, the party that claims to be for the middle class, that claims to be for municipal workers, and technically correctional officers fall in that under that umbrella, right? Within police, fire, EMS, transit workers, stuff like that. They are technically municipal workers. I know upstate is a little bit different. We are seeing something that I never thought possible, which is the Democrats are now starting to come after blue collar union workers.
Mm-hmm.
I have never seen this in my life. I'm seeing parallels of it with transit because especially when it comes to bus operators, where and also there are some things going on where these kids will have attacked train operators and conductors and will steal their tools and their keys, and then later on will then commandeer trains to take them where to go on joyrides. My question to you is, why has Kathy Hochul decided? It's actually a two-part question. Do you think this is the first major salvo in a Democrat war against the municipal worker? And the second question is, why has Kathy Hochul decided that this was the fight that she wanted to pick?
The easiest way I can explain that is that most bullies pick on people they think they can get away with it. Kathy Hochul is a bully. The modern Democratic Party in the state of New York in particular is a bully. If the correction officers were writ large voting for Democrats in a 2025 New York, and if the correction officers were the driving economic force in counties that were voting for a 2025 New York Democratic Party, they would have made the changes to HALT before the first correction officer walked out the door, right? But the Julia Salazars of the world do not represent a constituency that depends on those jobs to make a living. They do not represent a constituency where the people that do those jobs live next door to them. Most of the prisons in our state are far, far away from the majority of the people that cast their votes in Albany for the insanity that is ruining our state. And so that to me is why Kathy Hochul has picked this fight. On the same day, she is cutting new ads to hire fired federal employees. Come to New York, we'll hire you. We respect public service. I'm in Albany. with over 1,000 correction officers and their families, talking to a pregnant woman who is about to pop, who had a prenatal visit that day that she had to cancel because the governor had pulled her health care retroactive to 2 weeks prior, which is illegal, by the way.
Wow.
So if you think about it, this
Good
state
Lord.
that says that there is no such thing as illegal, no man is illegal. This state that blew a hole in the budget of the city of New York to the tune of over $5 billion, housing people here in an illegal status, making sure that those individuals could have a debit card with money to spend on it as they saw fit, literally yanked the health care away from people that show up to do one of the most difficult jobs in this state every single day. And what was the high crime and misdemeanor that they committed? They had the unmitigated gall to ask for safe work conditions. I'm sorry, when 30 people at a job site are getting finding themselves having to get Narcan, something has gone wrong in the work environment that exceeds what could normally be expected in any job. If that were any other facility, if it were a male facility, if it were just any kind of public sector worker, the place would have been shut down. The policies would have been examined immediately. The prison is all of these things because the prison has to process the mail. The prison also has to deliver health care to the people who are incarcerated. The prison also has to screen people. So we've got TSA screeners in the front. We've got healthcare providers in the back. And off to the side, you've got people who are cafeteria workers. It is all of these things at once. And they are under siege at every point along the ladder here by virtue of the fact that the state has simply said, we don't give a damn. We are more concerned about the politics of the policy than the people the policy was actually intended to help. Because I just want to keep reminding people, it's the inmate on inmate assaults that are stratospheric right now as a result of these implementations of the policies colloquially referred to as HALT.
This is yet another betrayal. And I consider this a betrayal because, again, like I said before, we come into work, we don't expect for nonsense like this. And it's like these people have, is there a sense, matter of fact, I'll ask you this question. Is there a sense among the staff up there that the governor, that state government is just like taking tools out of their hands to do their job, like the state is exacerbating the situation, and if so, to what end?
Look, again, I think they do it because they think they can get away with it. I mean, again, going back to the example I made earlier, up in Franklin County, upstate, this facility that we had, between 25 and 30 people exposed to a foreign substance getting Narcan. The nurse.
Wait. Hold on. Stick a pen. We're talking about a narcotic substance. That's the only reason why they would need Narcan. Am I right?
Correct. Last I checked, most people who show up at the doctor with depression or anxiety are not told, take 2 Narcan and call me in the morning, right? Narcan is specifically used for individuals that have been exposed to a lethal substance. So that's what's happening.
Yeah,
the fentanyl or whatever. I mean, look, here's the reality, right? Not to get off subject, and I'll come back to this, right? But I mean, you have part of the reason what they're asking for is screening of legal mail. Why are they asking for screening of legal mail? It's not because they're trying to make sure that they can, spy on the legal proceedings of the incarcerated. It's because of the fact that legal mail is the one thing that by law you can't take away from somebody. People are entitled to legal representation even when they're behind bars. But guess what? People have started to figure out, well, if I just take this paper, lace it with an illicit substance, and then just print legal letterhead on top of the paper, they can't take it away from me. So all of a sudden, you've got somebody in their cell. 1 minute they're reading their legal papers, and the next minute they're high as a kite. And now you have to have a correctional officer that's going in there to deal with somebody who no longer has any legal papers to be found because they're floating around in their small intestine and the drugs are coursing through their veins. So these are the types of things that are happening here, which is part of the reason of how you end up with correction officers and civilian staff finding themselves exposed to the substance accidentally. But it is not an accident on the part of the state if the state refuses to put policies and procedures in place to prevent this from happening. I mean, half the people in this, in the country that engage in some type of business, they've got a remote mailbox in Delaware or Wyoming or wherever. They scan the mail and they send you an email for it. Well, most of the people in many of these facilities, they have iPads, they have tablets. I mean, I don't know if people realize this. In specialized housing, AKA solitary confinement, there's Wi-Fi now. I mean, this is the state in which we're living. So, I mean, they've dredged up this draconian term, which makes you think of this draconian practice that no longer exists and hasn't existed in New York State for a long time. But that is literally ripped out of the playbook of the Democratic Party. That every year the Democrats tell us that reproductive rights in New York State are under attack. I ran for U.S. Senate in 2022. Reproductive rights are under attack. The 2024 cycle, we have to pass the Equal Rights Amendment because reproductive rights are under attack. Reproductive rights in New York have been cemented since before Roe v. Wade. But they keep trying to find a boogeyman to scare people with things that aren't even real, aren't even happening. Yep. And we're seeing it here with the correction officers. We see it everywhere. And so I honestly just think that Kathy Hochul thought she was going to get away with it. She's coming kind of close to getting away with it, if for no other reason. The media refuses to cover it. But the stories that come out of this are going to sink her. The stories that come out of this are going to destroy the New York State Democratic Party. And I think the legal litigation, when they find out that they violated HIPAA laws, by having people who were out on FMLA leave and workman's comp prior to the strike ever happening, called down to the facility to have supervisors give them a physical observation to figure out whether they could work or not.
No.
Right? This is what happened.
Oh my God.
The laws that the state of New York has broken, I believe you're looking at a 9-figure lawsuit, if not more, when all this is said and done. And they thought they could get away with it because it was just a bunch of people from counties we don't like doing jobs we don't care about, and they'll never be able to figure out what we've done to them. But the Taylor Law does not exempt the state of New York from providing a fake work environment, and it doesn't give the governor or the commissioner or any of the people from Homeland Security the right to try to bust their union using all manner of illegal tactics. So this governor's day of reckoning is coming. New York's day of reckoning is coming. And when this is all over, every single middle-class worker in this state is going to know what the New York State Democratic Party did to hardworking, honest people in the winter of 2025.
I gotta say, man, it's so crazy. I'm so happy that we're exposing this on here on Apostate Radio, and it's hilarious to find that all of us are on we're on the traditional left on this issue, right? They're traditionally protecting unions, protecting the middle class, protecting, having these laws to protect the worker. Like, we're all finding ourselves on what used to be the left in this issue, I feel like, and clearly the left is so lost, and I don't know who they're working for anymore besides the politicians themselves. And
I mean, to pick up on that point, right? And I think it's an important point to pick up on. And I think, we've had this conversation a little bit before, my friend. It's the Democratic Party was always on their own side, right? There was a boy who beat cancer, who was at the joint session by President Trump, and the Democratic Party refused to stand up for him. Why didn't they stand up for this little black boy that beat cancer? right? I mean, when they can't get through a single sentence without talking about all the evil things that this country has done to black people. It's because there has always been this hidden strain of bigotry that existed within the Democratic Party. It wasn't, yes, sometimes they don't even really hide it that well. Deal with these Negroes however you see fit. The wayward Negro that doesn't bend the knee to their party orthodoxy, right? We live in a state that paints Black Lives Matter on the streets of New York, but has literally 70% of the black students in public schools in New York City unable to do math at proficient levels. 65% of the students that are black in New York City cannot read at proficient levels, but they got Black Lives Matter written on the streets, right? This is the reality that we're dealing with right now. In the city of Rochester, and not to get off topic here, but it's worth mentioning, you have 20,000 families, and 16,000 of those families this past school year applied for charter school admission in a city where there are only about 2,000 charter school spots per year. The Democratic Party consistently says one thing about the people that they care about and does the direct opposite. And so I don't think this is new, right? The Democratic Party was on the side of the union when they could depend on the union vote. And as more and more unions say that they're not going to support their insanity, they have become hostile to unions because they got to find some new people to give them money. They got to find some new union.
We saw that with the Teamsters. We saw that with the Teamsters. If you remember, Sean O'Brien, when he was on Tucker Carlson, and he recounted that story from one of the members of his executive board, and Kamala Harris was basically shaking her finger in this lady's face, talking about, you better get on board. You better get on board. Like, I've never seen anything like this. I've been a member of a union, not going to disclose which one, but I've been in a labor union now for 10 years. Okay. It makes no sense to me how these institutions, the state was willing basically to break their own laws and throw people under the bus for not falling in line. And my question is, how did these people, with these correctional officers, how did they fall out of favor with the party? By simply asking questions about the conditions that they were asked that they were asked to work in?
Well, look. Let's just look at again. I do think that if you pull up a map of the state of New York in the 2018 election, and you pull up a map of New York in the 2022 election and 2024 election, and you will see exactly when they fell out of favor. Right? You can look at Clinton County, a county that people would think traditionally Republican, but often goes blue, particularly in presidential years. A place like Franklin County, places like St. Lawrence County and Warren County. These are the places that constitute a part of New York that people colloquially refer to as North Country, places that most New Yorkers have never stepped foot unless they were going on a vacation to go skiing or what have you. But people live
now, we're talking about, sorry to cut you off, Joe, but we're talking about like up near
the Canadian border. We're talking about, all the way over to Oneida. This is where the prisons are, right? The prisons aren't in Westchester County, by and large. That's not where we place our prisons, right? We don't place our prisons in Oyster Bay. We don't place our prisons in Midtown Manhattan. We don't place them in Dumbo. The prisons are in Franklin County. The prisons are in Washington County. The prisons are in Oneida County. The prisons are not in places where the people that keep the money in the coffers of the Democratic Party live. And that was fine before because the prisons were in places that could consistently be counted on for Democratic support, right? And that is also part of the reason why you have seen NYSCOBA and the corrections unions in the past giving bipartisan support to politicians on both sides of the aisle. But writ large, the power structure in the state of New York and nationally that has seen a Democratic Party overtaken by people that invented the most dangerous phrase in modern politics, defund the police. Overtaken by people like Julia Salazar, who believe in actually deconstructing institutions like prison from the inside, as if that is not going to be a disaster for the people who want to live their life peacefully on the outside. These individuals have complete disdain for those counties. They have complete disdain for the people that live in those counties. They have complete disdain for the honest day of work that the people who live in those counties do, for the loggers, for the correction guards, for the individuals who do the unseen work that keeps society going. And so that brings us to 2025 with 30 people on Bear Hill in Malone, New York, a place that most New Yorkers can't find on a map, finding themselves gasping for breath, passing out, being rushed to an emergency room, losing a child, and 14,000 brothers and sisters saying, we can't do this anymore. Something has to be done, and walking off the job. And here comes Kathy Hochul. She calls the strike illegal. She calls up 6,500 guardsmen, put them in the prison, right? Most people, they have to do 6 months of training before they can even get the job of a correctional officer. You've got people who are too young to even apply for the job, doing the job on about 3 hours to 6 hours worth of training. This is what's happening here in New York. And
my God.
Yeah, this is New York. So
not good.
Again,
Total betrayal.
It is
Total
a lot.
betrayal.
It is a lot to digest. It is difficult. If we didn't know any better and we had this conversation, you would think it wasn't real. How can it be real? What blue state rips away health insurance from? Because forget the employees. You ripped it away from the families. You have to also remember that most people that work for the state are on gap pay. The correctional officers are on gap pay. So their health insurance is paid through April. So how are you taking away health insurance that is paid through April retroactively to 2 weeks before the strike action occurred? How are you going and telling people that they're not going to be eligible to purchase Cobra in the free market if you fired them, right? And you're going to say it's for gross misconduct, for gross negligence. You're going to cite that portion of the Taylor Law, but you're going to ignore the portion of the Taylor Law that says you have an obligation to address safety in the workplace issues. Come on. This is just people abusing power for fun,
for its own sake,
for sport, because they can, because she wants to look tough in the face of Donald J. Trump. And so how does Kathy Hochul puff herself up? How do all these Democrats puff themselves up? Well, I'll drop the hammer on law enforcement. That'll make me look tough. If I drop the hammer on the boldest, that's what we call corrections officers across this state, right? New York's boldest. If I drop the hammer on the boldest, then clearly everybody will see what a big person I am. You're real tough. You got 6-year-olds showing up for dialysis and they can't get treatment. You've got grown men crying because they got to figure out if they're going to betray their brothers who walked out off the job for safety, but he's got a wife that's got to go to dialysis on Tuesday and they don't have the $8,000 out of pocket to cover it. You're a real tough person. You're a big hero. Again, they didn't ask for money. They're asking for a pay cut. Honest truth. There's $240 million for overtime, and they're simply saying, find somebody else to do the job so you can give them the money. That's literally a pay cut. For anyone at home paying attention, they're asking for less money. They simply said, we can't work like this. It's not safe.
I've never seen anything like this in my life. But like I said, I'm starting to see this in other departments within the state, and something tells me that transit is probably going to be one of the next departments
Here's,
waged, to have war waged on, you know.
But I don't know. I mean, it's difficult, right? You think about it, right? You can't call in the National Guard to run the trains, right? You can't call in the National Guard to drive the buses, right? And so, honestly, you know, the other part of the answer to your question, why is Kathy Hochul choosing to die on this hill? Correctional officers do a job far away from most people's everyday life that has been forgotten about by most people who live their life. Most people don't go to jail. Most people can't even find a jail on the map unless they happen to live in the area where those jails are found. So they are doing literally unseen work on the other side of a wall, on the other side of another wall, on the other side of bars. It is the most, in many ways, it is a segmented workforce in segmented communities that she can get away with bullying because the broader society doesn't know enough to understand just how atrocious what she's doing actually is.
Well, we are doing our part here to bring this story to light. And quite frankly, I've never, like I said, this is one of the most egregious things that this is one of the most egregious stories I have ever come across before we even started this podcast here. But Joe, I want to personally thank you for coming by. I thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come onto the show. Where can people contact you or interact with you for more information, sir?
Well, look, people can go find me on X, Joseph Pinion, one word. They can find me on Facebook and Instagram. I am Joe Pinion. We have built a website out for families impacted by this correction strike called holdthelineny.org. That's holdthelineny.org. I mean, there's so many facets of this that we haven't even had an opportunity to touch. The fact that now Tish James has been the self-designated henchman for the governor. They've got about 390 individuals that were served with an order to show cause that have to show up on Tuesday facing potential jail time and all types of fines. I mean, this whole thing is crazy. You have the union itself that the state hit with a temporary restraining order, which basically prevented the union from directly communicating with the membership, all while the state claimed that they were trying to actually communicate with the union for the purposes of trying to get the changes in place that the members wanted. I mean, you can't tell the union they can't talk to the membership. You're going to slap them with fines close to $750,000 a day, and then say that you're confused as to why the strike is happening, as Kathy Hochul did. Stood before the entire state media market, says, I have no idea why they're on strike. All while Letitia James is filing the petition in Erie County that quite literally lists their demands as an exhibit in the petition as to what they're actually seeking to come back to the work. This stuff is actually insane. And the irony of all ironies, I'm going to say it right here. They were all excited and jazzed up when Fannie Willis decided that there was a conspiracy, that you didn't have to be in the same room and even have a conversation with the other people involved in the conspiracy to be a party to the conspiracy. I want the emails. I want the phone records. I want to know how many times Kathy Hochul called Letitia James. I want to know how many times the commissioner called the attorney general. I want to know how they came up with the list of 10 people at every jail that they were going to be made an example of to be put into a petition out of Erie County. We want the emails, and we're going to find out the laws they have broken, the lengths they have gone to break the backs of families who just wanted to go to work in a safe work environment because they could get away with it. There has been nothing so heinous done in the state of New York in the modern history of this state. And when the true story of what has happened here has been told, somebody's going to emergency and somebody's going to jail. But I promise you, it's not going to be this rosy picture that they think is going to be told on the nightly news.
Once again, Joseph Pinion, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who want more information about this and to support the workers on the front lines, you can go to www.holdthelineny.org. Holdtheline.org. Joe, thank you, brother. I really appreciate you coming by.
Appreciate you guys.
Feel free. Matter of fact, if you want to come, you are free, you are welcome.
Yeah,
to
we got to
come
get Joe back
here anytime. And we'll give you as long as you need.
Yeah,
to go
we'll do a longer episode.
I'm dead. No, I'm dead serious because honestly,
important.
I want to know. The next time you come on, I want to know how this ties into Rikers and some of the area and some of like the local stuff here in New York City. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that soon. Joe, thank you again for coming on, brother. We really appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you,
a good fight.
God bless.
All right, have a great night. Thank you.